Kai and Tan Songyun were seen being escorted away by security at the airport. Kai shocked. Why would the two of them, appearing calm and composed moments ago, suddenly find themselves surrounded, guided, and almost corralled by airport security, their movements constrained, their privacy stripped away in an instant? What unseen force or unfolding chaos had turned an otherwise mundane departure into a spectacle that left Kai visibly shocked, his usually controlled demeanor faltering in a way that made every fan watching and every bystander present hold their breath, sensing that something far more serious, and far more complicated, was playing out than any headline would ever convey? Hold on tight, C-drama family. The world of your favorite celebrities is unfolding before your eyes, and every moment is more breathtaking than the last. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. It began just after they had passed through the initial security checkpoints, a moment when travelers often relax into routine, glancing at screens, adjusting bags, or checking flight times. Kai had been walking beside Tan Songyun with his usual quiet attentiveness, subtly shielding her from the press of travelers, adjusting her bag strap with a gentle precision, whispering a soft word here or there to ease her nervousness. Tan Songyun herself had been trying to maintain composure, though the faint pink tinge on her cheeks betrayed the embarrassment she always felt when someone cared for her so deeply, and she kept glancing toward him with a mixture of gratitude, amusement, and a subtle apology that required no words. In that fleeting bubble of normalcy, it seemed as though the morning's tension had dissolved, leaving only the quiet intimacy of shared moments that no camera lens could fully capture. And then it happened. A cluster of uniformed airport personnel appeared suddenly, moving with urgency and purpose, forming a protective cordon around them as if the very act of walking unaccompanied had become a potential threat. The press, previously scattered and discreet, began to notice, cameras flicking, flashes firing, the unmistakable low hum of a crowd gathering behind invisible barriers. Kai, for the first time that morning, felt an edge of real shock, a visceral tightening in his chest, a sense of disbelief that someone, or something, had escalated a simple departure into a public incident. His eyes darted toward Tan Songyun, who instinctively moved closer, her body language signaling that she, too, was startled, but in a very different way, not fear, not alarm, but embarrassment, the kind that blooms when attention lands precisely where it is most unwanted. She lowered her gaze, adjusted her mask, smoothed the folds of her sweater, all the while allowing the security personnel to guide them toward the waiting gate, their gestures firm, insistent, and final. For Kai, the shock was twofold. First, the unexpected intrusion of authority into what should have been an intimate, private departure made him question the logistics, the timing, and the reason for such an intervention. Second, the implicit acknowledgement that public curiosity, fan speculation, or even studio concerns had somehow reached this point made him realize, acutely and painfully, that their privacy was already no longer fully theirs. Every measured step he had taken that morning, every effort to create a quiet, controlled moment, had been rendered partially meaningless by a system designed to protect them, but in doing so had inadvertently exposed them to scrutiny, creating an atmosphere of heightened tension that neither of them was prepared for. Despite the organized professionalism of the airport staff, Kai's shock manifested subtly but unmistakably. His usually calm expression, carefully maintained even under pressure, was disrupted by micro-expressions, a brief narrowing of the eyes, a slight parting of the lips, a soft, almost imperceptible intake of breath. He scanned the area, instinctively seeking any potential threat, any intrusion, any anomaly, even though he knew intellectually that the security measures were standard. It did not matter. The sudden loss of autonomy, the presence of uniforms, radios, and clipped instructions, all acted like a jarring chord against the quiet rhythm he had been striving to maintain all morning. Tan Songyun, sensing his tension, instinctively reached for his arm, a small gesture of reassurance, but her own embarrassment only heightened, the awareness that others were observing, photographing, and speculating making her shuffle slightly forward, a blush rising even under the filtered light of the terminal. The corridor ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, a narrow channel where movement was dictated, pace controlled, and choices limited. Every step became a delicate choreography, balancing the demands of security, the crowd, and their own desire for a semblance of normalcy. Kai subtly adjusted his posture, keeping his frame protective yet non-intrusive, shielding Tan Songyun from cameras and stares, his eyes constantly scanning, calculating, anticipating, as though preparing for every possibility, every unexpected variable. Tan Songyun, meanwhile, walked with small, controlled steps, her body language reflecting both gratitude and the acute awareness that their every motion was now subject to interpretation, the kind that could be blown up into headlines, comments, and social media threads within minutes. By the time they reached the designated area where a vehicle awaited, the situation had reached a fragile equilibrium. Security personnel maintained their positions, the press, constrained but relentless, fired flashes in sporadic bursts, and travelers moved cautiously around the cluster of activity, aware yet uncertain of the tension contained within. Kai, finally able to exhale, maintained his protective stance until Tan Songyun was safely inside the car, ensuring that no unexpected contact or interference occurred. Even then, his hand lingered near the door, ready to step in again if needed, his gaze scanning the perimeter, his mind still processing the shock of the abrupt escalation. Tan Songyun, settling into the seat, lowered her eyes, cheeks still flushed, the embarrassment of being placed in the center of attention despite her intentions as stark as the sunlight glinting through the windows. For both of them, the incident was more than a logistical inconvenience, it was a vivid reminder of the fragile boundary between public life and personal space, between intention and perception, and between controlled moments of intimacy and the unpredictable scrutiny of the world. For Kai, the shock would linger, an echo of a morning meant to be private, transformed into a spectacle, a lesson in vigilance and care, and a testament to the depth of his concern for someone whose presence alone could disrupt even the most carefully maintained routines. For Tan Songyun, the blush, the embarrassment, and the fleeting self-consciousness were not signs of weakness but proof of the intimacy, trust, and subtle vulnerability she felt in that moment, a human reaction to the stark collision of private emotions and public attention. As the car pulled away, the airport receding behind them, both remained quiet, absorbing the intensity of what had just occurred, each processing in their own way the surreal mixture of shock, relief, and the quietly profound recognition that even in the midst of chaos, their connection, their trust, and their care for each other remained unshakable, a tether stronger than any uniformed escort, stronger than any flashing camera, and far more enduring than the fleeting attention of the world. Outside. The car ride that followed was quiet in a way that was almost heavy, the city rushing past in a blur of gray and gold, streetlights reflecting off the windows, distant horns and sirens reduced to a muted soundtrack behind the thick glass. Kai drove with deliberate care, his hands firm on the wheel, his jaw set, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed the storm still coursing through his mind. Tan Songyun sat beside him, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the windshield, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her seatbelt. The earlier embarrassment at the airport now softened into a quiet self-awareness, a realization of just how exposed she had been, how visible, how vulnerable in front of the cameras, the security, and the world watching. She had always managed the public eye with poise and grace, but today had been different. The careful composure she had cultivated for years had cracked under the weight of Kai's quiet vigilance, the intensity of the attention around them, and the undeniable fact that someone she trusted more than anyone had been willing to step into the chaos for her sake. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged, each heartbeat, each subtle breath, each glance that flicked briefly between them carrying the weight of what had just occurred. Kai's eyes remained on the road, but his peripheral awareness was total, every movement of Tan Songyun's hands, the slight shiver of her shoulders, the way her posture shifted as she tried to settle into the seat, all drew his attention. His mind replayed the chaos at the airport, the sudden rush of security, the glare of cameras, the flashes that had been intrusive and relentless. Shock had initially frozen him, had made him tighten his jaw, narrow his eyes, and focus on controlling the immediate situation. But now, alone in the car, the adrenaline of the morning began to fade, leaving behind a quiet but insistent pulse of worry, a lingering sense of vulnerability that no physical presence could shield completely. Tan Songyun finally broke the silence, her voice soft, tentative, carrying a mix of embarrassment and relief. She spoke almost to herself at first, murmuring about how sudden the security intervention had been, How unreal it felt to be guided so formally through what should have been a simple departure. Her words were measured, careful, yet there was a tremor of honesty in them, a small crack in the composure she maintained for the public, a subtle acknowledgement of the fear and discomfort that had brushed against her in the terminal. Sukai's response was quiet, deliberate, infused with the calm intensity he always carried, yet beneath it lay a raw undercurrent of emotion. He reminded her gently that nothing mattered more than her safety, that the measures taken were standard, but that his presence, his willingness to step away from his schedule, was not obligatory. It was a choice, a deliberate choice driven by care, trust, and the profound attachment that had grown between them over months of shared moments, both public and private.